Okay, so I am Dr. Rebecca Troy, and today I am joined by one of our amazing clients, Alyssa. And today we're here to celebrate her 10-year-old son. And so one of the reasons that we asked Alyssa to come on and celebrate is that her data was truly incredible. When her son started the program, he was at the 6th percentile, which means that his data was better than 6 out of 100 kids his age. And when he finished the program a couple months later, he was at the 99th percentile, meaning that he was reading better than 99 out of 100 kids his age. And so to go from the 6th percentile to the 99th percentile is truly incredible. And I think it's just helpful to interview the mama that did this and say, okay, so what was this really like? Did this really happen? What was before? What was after? So we're really appreciative that you're here today, Alyssa, and super excited to celebrate you. So if you don't mind, could you just share a little bit about what things looked like for your son before we met?
So before we met, we had been working quite extensively on his reading during school. We homeschool, and we had done several different programs. I mean, multiple programs. When I was counting them up, I probably counted about 4 or 5 different programs, and we had done them very regularly, but we just were not making progress. And in November of 2022, I started looking for other programs because we were just about done with our program that we were working on. And I was like, what were we going to do next? And when I got his assessments back from our homeschooling body, I was just like, oh my goodness, he's still so low and we've done all this stuff. What am I going to do? And I actually found this program through a Facebook search. And I was just like, oh my goodness, am I actually going to do something off of Facebook? We all know how Facebook can be that double-edged sword. And who do you trust on Facebook? You know, we've all heard of the puppy schemes where you order a puppy and you don't get your puppy. And
Yeah,
I wanted to make sure I got that puppy if I was going to order this. So I basically did a lot of searching, tried to find some more information, and I really didn't find a whole lot of information about this particular product. But I did listen to one interview that she had did with that Dr. Troy did with another client, and I was like, I want that. I want that. But will it be our case, you know? And so finally took the plunge. In late December, we went ahead and signed up and started in January.
Wow. So I know that sometimes different kids can experience the struggle with reading and spelling differently, but for you guys, what were some of those really hard things that caused you to say, like, I'm still so frustrated that the scores are low? Because the scores can be scores and they're things on a piece of paper, but it's really the human elements that you see at home that cause you to say, we've got to do something different about this.
So he was getting some of the blending with the reading okay, and he did okay with sounding out the bigger words, but it was just like those constant vowel consonant words he just did not get. I can't tell you how many times, how many stories have the word big in it, and we'd get to the word big and he would sit there and sound out big again. And I'm like, you just read that like 3 sentences ago. Why are we back at like trying to decide if that's a B, P, or Q, but that was him. And I'm like, I was like, it's a kindergarten word, and I didn't want to put it that way, but it was just like, he was at that stage where he should not, big should just be like snap of the finger,
Right. And I think one of the things that's challenging about having the over and over again, I'm struggling with this word, is that, whether he realizes that this is a smaller 3-letter word and I'm struggling to figure this out. But, in a homeschooling environment where you're trying to repeat that instruction over and over again, it almost feels like the hamster wheel where you're just kind of spinning and you're not really moving forward, which can be really overwhelming and frustrating for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the things that I thought was really, like, I just looked back at his assessments to see the difference between what kinds of words he was reading on the baseline assessment as opposed to the post assessment. But I saw that he got to the word plot and read it as pilot. And so that's kind of what it looked like before. But I looked at some of the words that he was decoding at the end: contagious, discretionary, seismograph, omniscient, oligarchy. I mean, like, these are significantly difficult words, and was able to decode those successfully. So could you tell us a little bit more about some of the changes that you've seen after he completed the program?
Well, he's definitely gotten more confident. We're still working on the confidence thing. And, you know, when he was decoding those, it wasn't like he just said them smoothly. He totally sounded them out, and then he'd get there. And some of those words, they were hard. Those ones were the hard ones for him, but he was able to do it. It's just having him be like, okay, you said it, now put it all together. And, you know, he got it. He had no idea what he was saying. But
those are new vocabulary words for him.
But he did, yeah, it was just kind of amazing
to just, see the growth between, like, I'm really struggling to read a word like big and know which letter it is, and then to have the skills and the tools to work through a multisyllabic word, I think is really awesome. Tell me more about spelling. Like, if you were to think about before spelling and now spelling, like, what would you say has been different for him?
Spelling was a challenge. He would it was almost like he couldn't hear the words. You know, he would say the word and he couldn't figure out what letters to put in what order. And he would sometimes have random letters just thrown in there and like, well, what's that for? And he'd be like, I don't know. And it was, yeah, it was just really, it was very, very low. And it was very frustrating as a mom, because it was like mom and / teacher, because I was like, we've gone over this lots of times. Right. And you still can't spell the word, you know, a simple word. And then it just came a huge route. He still doesn't like spelling and he still doesn't like reading, but he's much, much better.
He's successful at it. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So I guess if you were to think about some of the other things that might have been unexpected that you ended up gaining from being in the program, like, what would you say was an unexpected surprise as you joined?
The unexpected surprise was the community, because I knew that there was going to be support sessions with Zoom, but I didn't necessarily think that I would really interact with some of the other ladies. And now, granted, there's some guys on there too, but for the most part, it's the moms that are there, and interacting with the ladies. And you don't necessarily connect with everybody, but you get used to their face and the, you know, what they're going through. But there was a couple ladies that I definitely was able to connect with outside of our sessions. And that was actually really nice, because then you could see that there's other, you know, what we were experiencing at home, the behavior issues related with school, the mental breakdowns that the kids, you know, the tearful episodes where they just kind of lose it. That was very common. Even though we felt like we were in it alone, there's kids all over the place doing the same thing. And just supporting each other, going through it, figuring out what can we do, because often we've tried multiple things. It's not like we haven't tried anything.
For sure. And so, I mean, I think that's probably something that's a little bit unique about the community, is that it really is intended to be celebratory. And so when we bring things to the call of, gains that the child has made, or wins that come up, I mean, one of the things that always struck me about you is that even if it was small, you always brought a celebration to the call. And I think that was really helpful from my perspective to just kind of keep you going. And so, I mean, in terms of what it was like for you as a mom to have a celebratory community, I mean, do you feel like that helped?
It helps, yes, it does. Because, I do think that trying to keep on the positive and knowing that this is just a phase that it's going to go through, it's huge. But sometimes while you're going through that phase, it's very dark and it's very hard. And if you focus on the darkness, it eats you up versus focusing on the light and be like, what little step can I do next? What's the next little step? And then all of a sudden you're at the other side and you're like, oh, that was only 5 weeks, or that was only, but
Right.
in that process, it's hard if you just focus on the darkness.
For sure. For sure. So I think one of the other unique features about the way that we support clients is the mindset component that comes along with it. And so I know that that's something that you definitely attended and tapped into. So, I mean, would you care to comment about like some of the value that you felt the mindset components added for you?
Well, the mindset is helpful because then you realize how your mindset and your kid reflects your mindset. And most
For
of
sure.
us know that, but then just putting it into practice. And it's important to think about it because when you're dealing with a problem that's physical, it incorporates so much mentality and your spirit. So it's like you need to address all of those things to get a whole therapeutic treatment.
Yeah, different result for sure. And I think a lot of people underappreciate how important being in the right mindset and the right frame, not only as a parent, but for your child too, can really impact things. So I appreciate your perspective on, what you think that added. I guess one of the things that I want to just kind of ask you about, because I know other people will wonder, like, well, how did she do this? How did she take them from 6th percentile to 99th? Like, what would you say were the things that caused you to be so successful?
I would say consistency. We were trying to be very, very consistent. I was consistent with both doing the program with my son. We're very adamant about trying to get in 2 or 3 sessions a day. Usually, so the program recommends 15 to 20 minutes or 10. I can't remember what you usually say. And I was like, well, at first that I couldn't sit down and do the 15 minutes at a time, but we could do 10 pretty easily. And so I would try to do 10 minutes 2 or 3 times a day. And I would make the sessions look different each time. And we use a variety of different methods to make it engaging, but I try to get those all done, and we try to get them done by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So if we waited till evening, then it was like, it wasn't happening. Or that last session wasn't happening, but we were very consistent with it. And then I was consistent at going to each call. Now those calls were kind of hard to make at times, especially with the time zone differences. But let me tell you, they were helpful because they kept you accountable of what you're doing now. And most of the time, I can honestly say I probably only missed a handful of calls. Most of the time it was either I was working on a Thursday night, which I work in an emergency department. I can't zoom in on a call during work hours.
Yep.
Patient flow just doesn't help that. And then, so mainly it was because of either travel or I was at work, and it was pretty hard to do that. So the calls were huge. And then I try to do all the other things associated with making sure your kid can learn, like making sure they have the sleep and they're eating and stuff like that. Because for us, we had to make sure that he ate because he sometimes wouldn't eat very well.
Yeah, and I know that we've talked about this a little bit, but a lot of people discount the relationship between gut health and brain health and how important those two systems are to one another. And so that's not necessarily something that we emphasize with all clients, but would you say that that made some improvements for you guys to just make sure that the body and especially the gut health was in good working order?
Yes, I would, without getting into too much detail,
Yep.
because I can get into the weeds with that. But yeah, I would just definitely talk about nutrition and having the proper building blocks so that your brain can do what you need to do.
Uh-huh. Yep. I think that's awesome. So I do, and this is especially for people that are in the program. I always think that it's so powerful to share how when you just show up and you do the things that you're being asked to do, and you show up to the Q&As and you get the accountability and you get the coaching, it's really just kind of a step-by-step process. And would you say that compared to other homeschooling things that you've done, do you feel like the program was overly complicated? Like if somebody was going to ask you like, okay, Alyssa, was this super hard to do in terms of the day-to-day activities?
No, the day-to-day activities isn't. And even with like homeschool, any homeschool stuff or any teaching your kid anything, whether it's music lessons or anything, as long as you show up and are consistent, and that's where it's hard because it's sometimes hard to get people to be consistent. And
Yeah,
even
yeah.
yourself, it's hard to be consistent,
Yep,
but you have
it
to make it,
is.
you just have to make your commitment that yes, I'm going to get this done.
Yep.
And other things
And
sometimes it's undone while
yeah,
you're doing
absolutely. Absolutely. And so, I mean, in terms of the commitment to your why, I mean, how did you, because I think that that can be really challenging sometimes to just land on like, this is the reason that I am going to do this. What would you say that your why was?
I wanted him to love reading, or at least be able to read and function at a appropriate level. And he doesn't have to be a neurosurgeon. He doesn't have to be anything super, he can do what he wants to do. But whatever you do, you have to be able to read. You have to be able to read a contract. You have to be able to read instructions. And I hope he learns to love it. At this point, he doesn't necessarily love it, but he can do it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And, I think the more that you can stay anchored to, this is the reason why it's so important to me. And obviously you love your son and you want the best for him in terms of opportunities and other things. And so for that reason, you stay committed and consistent to all of the things that you set your sights on. So I am so proud of you guys. Is there anything else, Alyssa, that you would like to share that we haven't talked about that you think would be good for anybody else that's potentially thinking about, how do I support my kid that's got dyslexia?
Yeah, I would say do whatever you can do to help support them. And if it's this program, it's great. I know that there's lots of different programs out there, but I would say that this definitely worked because we have tried a lot of the other programs. And a lot of people told me, well, you could try get tutoring. And the reality is where we live, there isn't any tutoring. And I wasn't thrilled about the idea of doing online tutoring. And this fit what I liked best in that, because I didn't want him to be on a computer doing whatever he needs to do. I wanted it to be us doing something. And this is exactly what happened.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experience, your wins with us, and especially your habits, because I really can't tell you enough how important your consistency, your mindset, your goals, and commitment to showing up was on your results. And it would be foolish to think that that wasn't a huge factor in going from 6 to 99 percentile, because that's absolutely incredible. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Alyssa.
You're welcome.